And we'll say our blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshana b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Amen, amen. You say amen, you get full credit. All right, we are now streaming. There's no one joining us yet, but they could join us asynchronously. Okay, so I gotta share this or else nobody will know what we're doing.
Not even us.
24.
Not even us.
Shmuel.
Okay, yep, 24. Okay, so David went from there. Remember, he was at the Rock of Separation. David went from there and stayed in the wilderness of Ein Gedi. Today, Ein Gedi is a nature reserve in Israel. It's a wonderful place to visit. When Saul returned, but Ein Gedi, just for geographical content, is south of Jerusalem, so still in this hilly area. But it's like there's a lot of water. It's a natural area in the midst of what is otherwise a very rocky, hilly, not very hospitable area. So Saul took 3,000 of the best troops from all Israel and went in search of David and his men in the direction of the rocks of the wild goats. And he came to the sheepfolds along the way. There was a cave there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now, as
We
men,
really need to know that?
well,
Yes.
now you know why he did that. Otherwise, you might sit here and think, why did he go into that cave? Because the cave is very important, because someone else is in the cave. Who else is in the cave? Now, David and his men were sitting in the back of the cave. So Saul happens to wander in to pee in the cave that David and his men are sitting in, which is an awkward situation.
Yeah.
David's men said to David, "This is the day of which God said to you, I will deliver your enemy into your hands. You can do with him as you please." He's obviously in a very vulnerable situation. And they have the drop on him, you would say. They know he's there, but Saul clearly doesn't know they're there. David went and stealthily cut off the corner of Saul's cloak. But afterward, David reproached himself for cutting off the corner of Saul's cloak. He said to his men, "God forbid that I should do such a thing to my Lord, God's anointed, that I should raise my hand against him, for he is God's anointed."
Forgive me, Rabbi, I have to respond to Chris and the psychiatric things.
Okay, sure.
I think maybe there's something symbolic there. The corner of his cloak is what he got off. Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
Rabbi.
No, that's all right.
This is before zippers.
Yes,
Ah.
yes.
So it's very interesting. This idea, which we will see the kings of Europe later emphasize, that one can't lift their hand against God's anointed. One will notice this is a very comfortable thing for kings to have be true. That you shouldn't harm the king. You shouldn't harm God's anointed. It's very convenient for kings. Of course, doesn't really play out in all of history, but it's an interesting, and of course, this is the point in David. David is a moral man.
Well, my commentary points out that, the magnanimity and merciful nature of the activity.
Yeah, right, exactly. So that is teaching us something about David, which is part of this. We're supposed to learn not only was he compassionate, he didn't take advantage of his enemy's cluelessness in that situation, but he then rebuked himself for saying, "It's not even to me." Oh, I spilled all over myself. God knows. It's not even up to me to harm him at all, because God anointed him king. Now, of course, there's some complexity to that, right? God also you can't really strip an anointing, but God also took the kingship from his family. So there's obviously, you could make the argument, which is part of the goodness of David, I guess you could say. You could make the argument actually that there's nothing at all wrong with just killing Saul in this moment. He's crazy. He did that massacre that we read about last time, remember? I mean, he's a bad guy at this point. You could make the argument, and his troops do, that what you should do is end it now. God even told you he would deliver the enemy into your hands. And here you go. He's busy, and you see him. Walk up behind him and go, ha ha! And then you're done. The whole war is over. And you're the king.
And he'd already been anointed. I mean, that's what Mashiach means.
Yes.
And he's been anointed by Samuel. And he doesn't seem to get the idea that he's the anointed one. And Saul listened.
But Shakespeare points out, of course, in the version, it's the quality of kings, and the man of power is also merciful. The same, I find the small person wants retribution and wants their pound of, we as a human, I want retribution for my enemies.
Sure. And it's certainly good to be merciful. I mean, being merciful is emulating one of the 13, what we believe are the 13 aspects of God,
Yes.
attributes of God. One of them is rachamim, is mercy, and so you should want to be merciful.
Especially towards myself.
Well, the thing is, actually, God wants you to be merciful towards yourself, but as much as you are merciful towards others. And if you can do that, then you're truly embodying mercy. Because you should be merciful to yourself, but not only to yourself. If you're only merciful to yourself, then you're just self-aggrandizing or selfish.
To go off on a tangent, a couple of weeks ago, I was over the Classic Bean, and this band was playing this song entitled "Creep." It's by Radiohead.
Yeah.
And one of the lines, it's a bad song.
I mean, it's an artistic, it's a good song.
The person's proclaiming, "I'm a creep. I wish I was special. I want control." Don't you realize what
I think it's been very common for the powerless over time to express the desire to one day be powerful.
Sure. But God knows that we're all special, and we should acknowledge that.
It would be wonderful if everyone
But
felt.
see, that's the temper of our
unique.
times. It has 1 billion hits on it, and the veiled pride of when you're saying that about yourself. I'm not.
I know, but saying you're a creep and a weirdo is kind of self-defacing, which is also not good.
That's why I'm driving at it. It's veiled pride.
Maybe,
Yes.
but again, pride is not, doesn't
I'm
rise
a
to the
much
same
worse-
level for
I'm
us.
a much worse person than you, Sam.
I don't know whether that's true, but
Well, I
we'll
think
see.
so.
If this could have saved several hundred lives, you wonder why he didn't kill. I mean, because
Well, that's a very utilitarian argument.
Saul is no longer the anointed. David's the anointed, and Saul's going to cause more death.
Well, in any way, I see your point, but David won't hear your point.
No, I understand.
As we see in verse 8, David rebuked his men and did not permit them to attack Saul. Saul left the cave and started on his way. So in other words, what Rashi says is what it means. He refused to listen to any further attempts to persuade him to kill Saul right now. Because the men kept going. We get from this that Rashi's saying the men kept being like, no, man, come on. Like, he's still over there. He's standing. And David's like, I really will not hear another word. I've decided we're not killing him. That's just what it's going to be. And then we're going to have this moment. It's a fun moment. Then David also went out of the cave and called after Saul, my Lord King. Saul looked around and David bowed low in homage with his face to the ground. And David said to Saul, why do you listen to the people who say David is out to do you harm? You can see for yourself now that God delivered you into my hands in the cave today. And though I was urged to kill you, I showed you, I don't think pity is going to be the word here. I'm pretty sure it's going to be mercy.
Understanding.
Amar lo esla.
They have understanding.
Right. Yeah, understanding. Okay. Yeah, compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion.
What is Wadahos? Mine says an ellipsis of Wadahos.
What?
I mean, that's Hebrew, isn't it? Wadahos.
I've never seen that kind of transliteration before. So I need to see the Hebrew itself.
Okay.
I need to see the Hebrew. Okay, yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. It's worth noting here that the rabbis of the Talmud will later say that the reason David wouldn't kill Saul here was on behalf of Saul's positive qualities, such as his modesty. So that's the rabbis wanted to explain essentially David's actions, and that's how they explain it. Okay, so he said, I won't raise my a hand against my Lord since he is God's anointed. And in verse 12, this is a really dumb starting. It says, please, sir, in my translation, but it's literally V, which is, and my father. C, also. It says, see also that you see, which we translate as take a close look. See doubly. See very closely at the corner of your cloak in my hand. For when I cut off the corner of your cloak, I did not kill you. You must see plainly that I have done nothing evil or rebellious, and I have never wronged you. Yet you are bent on taking my life. Couldn't put in starker context. Sorry. Just David is being good. David is being, you know, righteous, and is asking for reciprocation. But of course, he can't get that. Saul is not like again. It's like if David was if peak David. If we're saying this really is peak David, the best version of David. If he was talking to the best version of Saul, the young Saul that just gets anointed and wins the war and tries to take care of the people, you imagine maybe they could come to an understanding. But of course, that's not how time works. And David's not talking to that Saul. So he says, David continues in verse 13. May God judge between you and me, and may God take vengeance upon you for me, but my hand will never touch you. So you're being unfair to me, but it's not going to be me that kills you, because I don't kill kings, which is a good precedent for when he becomes king. You say people shouldn't kill kings. Look at me, I never tried to kill the king. I'm just saying it's a good precedent to set if you want to be the king. So he said, I will never hurt you, but I hope that God will decide which of us is more fit to be king. Verse 14. As the ancient proverb, the mashal, has it, wickedness comes from the wicked. My hand will never touch you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom are you pursuing? A dead dog? A single flea? Isn't that funny? What's David doing here?
I'm a nothing.
Right, he's referring to himself, right? He's saying the king of Israel, this great figure is coming, like you're devoting all your energy to go after one guy. May God be arbiter and judge between you and me. May God take note and uphold my cause and vindicate me against you. When David finished saying these things to Saul, Saul said, is that your voice, my son David? And Saul broke down and wept.
Catharsis,
Well,
Weeping.
and also the father-son thing again.
yeah. And at that moment, he got to Saul, didn't last long.
Right. This is like, I mean, this is a moment I have trouble. I see it almost, Saul is having memory issues. It's like he doesn't know who the people around him are all the time. And this is one of those which happens moments of clarity.
Mhm.
And he has a moment of clarity, and he knows David in that moment, and he remembers the David that served him and loved him. And he has this moment here where he breaks down and weeps. And what does he say? Right? Because he breaks down and weeps, he realizes he's pursuing his own misery. He's pursuing someone who loves him. And he said to David, reminds us of Judah and Tamar back in the book of Genesis, where he says to her, "You are more right than I." And in verse 18, Saul says to David, "You are right, not I." Or he literally, "Tzadika tamimeni," you are more right than I. For you have treated me generously, but I have treated you badly. Yes, you have just revealed how generously you treated me, for God delivered me into your hands, and you did not kill me. If a man meets his enemy, does he let him go his way unharmed? Surely God will reward you generously for what you have done for me this day. That's an interesting statement just there. He recognizes fully as a warrior, the one thing he's always been is a good warrior. And he says, hey, I can't think of a single time that I've had an enemy in my sights and just said, easy takedown, but I'll just let him go. Let alone, a high value, it's like, he's like, clearly you're not my enemy. Verse 21, I know now that you will become king, and that the kingship over Israel will remain in your hands. So swear to me by God that you will not destroy my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's house. David swore to Saul. Saul went home, and David and his men went up to the strongholds.
All taking place in the cave.
What do we think?
I'm thinking a number of things. I think what you said a few moments ago is correct, that even in his fog, he has moments of clarity and lucidity, and this may be one of them. But I also think it's typical of us as people that we do realize at times, oh my goodness, I've been making a horrible mistake. I feel horrible about it. I need to change. But it doesn't always last. We make the mistake again later.
Yeah,
That's human nature.
that is human nature. Exactly. It's something we all do. I think we can relate to.
Remembers everything, and occasionally it'll flip back to a memory, and then.
Right, it's what motivates us most in that, which part of our brain, what's getting activated when, and how are we? Yeah, absolutely.
The good and bad angels of each year.
Right. And now it's time for the prophet who's going to give David his anointing, because we need a new prophet. Because as we begin chapter 25, we start with Vayamot Shmuel, and Samuel died. And all Israel gathered and made lament for him, and they buried him in Ramah, his home. David went down to the wilderness of Paran. So he also may have gone and eulogized Samuel, but if he did, he didn't stay there long. He went down to Paran afterwards. There was a man in Maon whose possessions were in Carmel. The man was very wealthy. He owned 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. At the time, he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The man's name was Naval, and his wife's name was Abigail. The woman was intelligent and beautiful, but the man, a Calebite, was harsh and an evildoer. David was in the wilderness when he heard that Naval was shearing his sheep. David dispatched 10 young men, and David instructed the young men, go up to Carmel. When you come to Naval, greet him in my name. Say as follows, Lechai, not Lechaim, To life, greetings to you and to your household and to all that is yours. I hear that you are now doing your shearing. As you know, your shepherds have been with us. We did not harm them, and nothing of theirs was missing all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. So receive these young men graciously, for we have come on a festive occasion. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can. This reminds me of another general who, because he was marching for so long, was unable to do regular procurements, and so had to ask wealthy landowners in the area to graciously give what they could. I'm referring to General Sherman, of course, on his march to the sea. What happened to the people who didn't give General Sherman what he wanted?
He killed him.
Burned their property.
Well, he took what he needed and then burned their property. So, behind David's men's flowery language, I implore you to perhaps see that it sounds a little mafioso-esque. Our young men protected your shepherds. Perhaps you would now like to make a donation to our cause.
An offer you can't refuse.
Exactly. Here are my young men with swords. Perhaps you would like to make a donation, my rich man, who has been protected by our swords. You see, please recognize that flowery language, like it does today, serves a purpose often of masking intent.
The underlying.
Right. The possible outcomes. So, verse 9, David's young men went and delivered this message to Nabal in the name of David. When they stopped speaking, Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse or Yishai? There are many slaves nowadays who run away from their masters." What's this response we get here? Sorry, let's finish the response. One more line, verse 11. Should I then take my bread and my water and the meat that I slaughtered for my own shearers and give them to men who come from I don't know where? What's Nabal's response to David's men's request?
I don't know David, and I'm not giving you anything.
Sure.
For you to ask this of me.
Right. Not only that, but he says, "Who's David?" He says, "There are many slaves nowadays who run away from their masters."
This is referring to David leaving.
Right, that David is right. He's saying, David, you mean the guy who used to work for Saul and is now a rebel who lives in the hills? Why should I give him anything? Right? I mean, it'd be like right now if somebody came to you and said, "I'm the head of the Kansas militia, and we're gonna take on the government. Give me your food and stuff," and you'd be like, "I'm gonna call the police who work for the real government, because you're a crazy person and I don't want to give you anything." And that would be fair. And that's Naval's response too. So he's like, "I don't want to give you anything. You come from I don't know where. I don't know you. I don't want to give you anything." That's basically what it was. Okay, they refused. So verse 12, David's young men retraced their steps. So they went back, and when they got back, they told David all of this. They told him that Nabal did not extend a welcome to us and gave us nothing. Moreover, he even insulted you personally. And David said to his men, "Gird on your swords. Let's get going. Time to gear up." Each girded on his sword. David too girded on his sword. About 400 of them went up after David, while 200 remained with the stuff. So to protect the camp, essentially. One of Naval's young men told Abigail, Naval's wife, that David had sent messengers from the wilderness to greet their master, and that he had spurned them. But those involved had been very friendly to us. We were not harmed, nor did we miss anything all the time that we went about with them while we were in the open. which also implies they do know them, right? When they said, we protected some of your people before, and he said, I've never even heard of you. Nabal must have been lying because Abigail has heard of them, right? And the servants have heard of them. Obviously, other people in Nabal's household have heard of these people before. So verse 16, they were a wall about us both by night and by day, all the time that we were with them tending the flocks. So at least David was not lying when he said he at least did them a service, right? He's not just asking for protection, money. He did actually do some protecting at least. So consider carefully what you should do, for harm threatens our master and all his household. He is such a nasty fellow that no one can speak to him. So the servant is turning to Abigail. Why? Because he can't go to Nabal because Nabal's a jerk and he's going to hurt this guy or so. He's not going to be receptive to the warning. That it seems stupid to confront these people who both helped us and are powerful. Seems like a really dumb thing to do.
And a woman comes to the rescue.
Yes.
She'll have to because he can't be reasoned with, is what the servant is telling her, which I'm sure she knows already.
What does Abigail mean? Abi is my brother, right?
Abi's my father.
My father, Avi is, well,
Yeah, it's one sec.
Akim is brother, isn't it?
My father is joy,
joy.
is what Abigail means. Okay, so verse 18. Abigail quickly got together 200 loaves of bread, 2 jars of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of parched corn, 100 cakes of raisin, and 200 cakes of pressed figs. She loaded them on donkeys, and she told her young men, "Go on ahead of me, and I'll follow you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. Remember, we've seen this kind of gifting before. Remember when Jacob was very afraid of Esau? What did he do when they were going to meet for the first time since they were children? He sent a bunch of gift caravans first, so that when they met, it'd have been like, oh, you sent me like 10 gift caravans before I even saw you. How can I kill you now? You gave me so much stuff. So this is kind of a similar, like, before we talk, let's make sure we grease the wheels a little bit.
Was that a Middle Eastern custom?
It was clearly, and it seems because of the repetition, that it was certainly a known diplomatic process of the time. Okay, verse 20. And she was riding on a donkey, again, donkeys, very humble, and going down a trail on the hill when David and his men appeared, coming down toward her, and she met them. Now David had been saying, "It was all for nothing that I protected that fellow's possessions in the wilderness, and that nothing he owned is missing. He has paid me back evil for good." Which is, not what you want to be paid back with, generally. Verse 22, "May God do thus and more to the enemies of David, if by the light of morning I leave a single male of his." And of course, the Hebrew is far more vulgar for anyone who can read it. What he says, of course, is he says, "So shall God do to the enemies of David, and so shall he continue, if I leave of all that is his until morning, any who urinates against the wall." So men, but yeah. So I guess that's what men do. Also dogs, maybe. Also dogs. Yeah, it seems here, it says here, David swore that he would not leave any, this is a derogatory reference to males. David swore that he would not leave any males of Nabal's family alive. Alternatively, David was saying that he would not leave anything remaining in Nabal's house, not even a dog, an animal that generally urinates against the wall. So there you go. There's an understanding of that verse. When Abigail saw David, she quickly dismounted from the donkey and threw herself face down before David, bowing to the ground. "Prostrate at his feet," she pleaded. Let the blame be mine, my lord, but let your handmaid speak to you. Hear your maid's plea, right? She's denigrating herself to glorify him, which again is a good way to earn yourself good grace. Please, my lord, pay no attention to that wretched man, to Naval, for he is just what his name says. His name means boor, and he is a boor. Your handmaid did not see the young men whom my lord sent. I swear, my lord, as long as God lives and as you live, God who has kept you from seeking redress by blood with your own hands, let your enemies and all who would harm my lord fare like Naval. And now she continues. So what she's doing, what is she doing? She's going to save everybody, right? I didn't see them. He's an idiot. I would have fixed this. You should have been received properly. You know, you should have been given your due. I know that, but he's an idiot. What can I say? Right. Trying to be like, don't hurt. He's just a harmless idiot. I know what's going on. Here's all these gifts. Please leave us alone. You came for this. Let me give you what you came for, and we can put it all behind us, is essentially what she's saying.
Reason.
Well, the voice of please don't kill us all.
Yeah.
You know, that's the whole thing. She's even essentially saying when she says, like, as God lives and as you live, God who has kept you from seeking redress by blood with your own hands. Right? You're too merciful for this, David. You're too good a guy to kill us all.
Yeah, you're not like Logan Ball.
Right. You're not like that boor, my husband. Right? Men like to hear that kind of stuff, I guess. She's like, oh, you're such a handsome man, David, not like my boor of a husband, right? Right? And so David's like, I mean, okay, maybe we won't kill anybody today. Anyway.
Except maybe Nabal.
Well, you know, she's trying to save him too. She's trying to save everybody. So verse 27, here is the present that your maidservant has brought to my lord. Let it be given to the young men who are the followers of my lord. In other words, you asked for food for these guys. Here it is. Please pardon your maid's boldness, right? Because she's the one who went out and gave him what he asked for. This is not the traditional role of women at this time. So she's asking forgiveness for that because, again, she's trying to play on David's piety or perceived piety to get him to change his course.
A humble, active diplomat.
Right. So she's like, oh, I wouldn't be doing this except that God wants me to stop you from killing everyone. I'm supposed to give you these gifts so that you'll have them so that no one will be harmed. Could work. Yeah. So please, right. Please pardon your maid's boldness, for God will grant my Lord an enduring house, right? We're already talking. It's not just David and Saul. Other people seem to know about whose house will endure in the kingship of Israel in this moment. She said, well, God will grant my Lord an enduring house because my Lord is fighting God's battles and no wrong is ever to be found in you.
Not this weekend.
That's some high grade butter she's using.
You bet.
Some high grade buttering up we got going here. So yeah, there's that. And if anyone sets out to pursue you and seek your life, the life of my Lord will be bound up in the bundle of life in the care of God, who will fling. And we get this kind of Yitror Bitror is in our El Malay Rachamim funeral prayer. To be bound up in the bond of eternal life.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this language actually makes it into stuff like that. That's the deepness of the language, spiritual language she's using here, really. Just to give you that, like this is real. Yeah, the life of my Lord will be bound up in the bundle of life in the care of God. Turara bitzror chachayim et Adonai Elohecha. Who will fling away the lives of your enemies as from the hollow of a sling. Of course, she makes a sling reference too, because it's David. It's not just us thousands of years later who like making sling references. It was very popular in its own day. So she's got all the references. She might be the greatest diplomat in the history of the Jewish people. Certainly, we're not employing any good ones today in Israel. So we Maybe we need Abigail to come back to be a good diplomat. I don't know.
She should be Secretary of State.
And when God has accomplished for my Lord all the good promised to you, and has appointed you ruler of Israel, do not let this be a cause of stumbling and of faltering courage to my Lord, that you have shed blood needlessly, and that my Lord sought redress with his own hands. And when God has made my Lord prosper, remember your maid.
What an exchange of wisdom.
Right. You're going to be so rich. You're going to be the king of an enduring house. What is a little bit of food in our small house compared to what your greatness will be? Remembered through all time, bound up in the bond of God. I mean, come on, this is really heavy-handed. But she makes a compelling argument. After all, she brought all the stuff he needed. And now she has totally emasculated her husband in the eyes of David's troops.
Yes.
Killing him, shoving his sword down the guy's throat wouldn't be as emasculating as the guy's wife coming out to beg for their lives. So he kind of already won. Not with Naval, but he kind of already won. He's gonna buy it. He's gonna play the game of language. This is a very diplomatic conversation, and God is the interesting question is God in this conversation because their piety is true, or is God the diplomatic medium by which they are addressing their concerns and their needs?
Very well.
And it
Could be either. I'm not saying that he's being cynical,
You know,
and it could be both.
Freud said we have multiple causations of it.
I anticipate a celebration is coming and she's gonna say, let's sit down and eat.
That would be, if it goes perfectly, that would be the way it goes. Watch out though, because David likes bed warmers.
Oh, okay.
We'll get to more to David in a bit. He's a very strange character.
Right.
Okay, so David said to Abigail, Baruch Hashem. This is how he starts. Baruch Hashem Elohei Yisrael Asher Shalachech Hayom Hazeh Likrati. He says, Baruch Hashem, praise be God, the God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. And blessed be your prudence, and blessed be you yourself for restraining me from seeking redress in blood by my own hands. For as sure as God, the God of Israel, lives, who has kept me from harming you, had you not come quickly to meet me, not a single male of Naval's line would have been left by daybreak. David then accepted from her what she had brought to him, and he said to her, Go up to your home safely. See, I have heeded your plea and respected your wish. I won't kill Naval. I don't have to kill anybody. You gave me what I wanted. And more than that, you gave me the opportunity to be merciful. Who remembers the stories of Caesar? If you ever studied the life of Julius Caesar, you would know that his greatest opportunities for growth and expansion of his own power came not from his military victories, but from the opportunities he had to be merciful and generous. Generous with the people, giving them money and favors, generous with political partners and even political enemies by giving them position. Now, again, that last part didn't work out great for him in the end, because some of those people he gave jobs, like Brutus and Cassius, turned out not to like him so much in the end. But the point was still good, and it helped him grow immensely. There's a great power in using mercy, and as a weapon. And David essentially is using mercy as a weapon, because he's now he's getting what he wants, getting glorified in a way that will help him take the throne, and getting to earn favor with the people, because he says, I had a real righteous reason to kill everyone here, but I won't. Now, how righteous was the reason? Depends. If you see it as protection money, or protection food, then it doesn't seem that righteous, but it could be righteous if you view it from his perspective. If you view it from, we protected them in the wilderness, we are now in need, we came to ask for help, and they insulted and rejected us. You could see his argument maybe. So there's plausible deniability here. And it shows David to have a diplomatic skill that Saul hasn't really been able to summon in many years. Remember, Saul used to be pretty decent at the whole king game, but his craziness has made it impossible for him. And he can't show mercy almost anymore. But David is using both the sword and not the sword in extremely effective ways. Any thoughts?
Daryl's mentioned it, the woman's ability to tame man's passion. And I think that's true.
There's also an evolution of the kingship. Saul didn't have compassion. David had some, but was a warrior. And then Solomon solved almost everything through non-warlike means. Of course, he then got perverted by the gods, and that was a bad thing. But still, he was seen as wise and all that.
Use the word generous.
Yes.
Carl Maniger says a well-adjusted person is also generous. And you can also substitute the word love for this idea too of being merciful.
Solomon's perspective.
Generous.
What would you say?
Same.
You would be silent. I'll let it
I
take its
just
course.
listen.
Well, in any event,
Of course, seeking vengeance, retributions also suggests you're lacking in forgiveness too.
maybe, and it's difficult, right? Because it's a matter of degrees.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to be merciful, but there are wicked, evil, there are things that need to be fought. Mercy isn't always God's preferred answer to something. Jews believe God balances in two hands, Din and Rachamim, judgment and mercy.
Right.
And that's part of the
Power?
Sephiroth.
Right.
That's what.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Kabbalah.
Oh, okay, yeah, this Spiro, right.
You're not in there.
I'm not a Kabbalist, so to me,
They're talking about psychological.
I understand.
reality,
And I give credit to that. I'm not saying it's
And what
false.
you're
I'm just
saying,
saying
if
I'm
you
not a
go too
Kabbalist.
far to either side, you get problems, but if you can balance between them and have the situation.
God tries to balance, yes,
Yeah.
between Din and Rachamim, between judgment and mercy. Sometimes it has to fall on judgment because it's not an even scale if it only falls on mercy.
Sometimes you gotta hurt them to help them.
And sometimes someone earns hurt, unfortunately. There are wicked things that there are people, if you're out there, I would argue Saul is getting to that point. If you're gonna just start murdering whole towns of people, you might need to be dealt with. I'm sorry. That used to be an acceptable thing to say. God does not want the wicked to persist in their wickedness. Yeah.
similar.
Yeah. I made this point. We've had this discussion recently about what it means to celebrate or whatever the downfall of your enemies. And some people say it's always a bad thing. And they quote perhaps the angels being jubilant when the Egyptians drowned in the sea and God saying, well, they're my creations too. Except there's also a psalm that mentions that the city rejoices at the downfall of the wicked. Because of course, the truly wicked, those who can ruin the lives of great numbers of God's creatures, who has the right to cause great pain on that many of God's creations? No one should have that right. And when they cross, admittedly, it's it's a line that we have to set every time, but that's when Dean takes its turn.
The wit, the wisdom, and humility and mercy are all contained in that passage. Everything that is characteristic of God.
That's interesting.
Is God humble enough to listen to us, even when we make a mistake?
I think so. I think God listens to us all the time. I think we are very bad at recognizing We are very bad at recognizing God, but God is not bad at recognizing us. And I think this is it's all Heschelian. My philosophy on this is totally Heschelian. You could get it yourself just by reading, Man is Not Alone and God in Search of Man, by Abraham Joshua Heschel, which are only two of his many great books. But a really good, understanding of how God manifests in the world without it being too, esoteric.
So in that passage, we're meeting the human faces of God.
In a way, and we believe that God has, not God, but that the Torah, God's instruction to us, has 70 faces. That's how many
Multi-dimensional.
interpretations or more. 70 is just a placeholder number.
Didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, there's Shivim Panim LeTorah is what it says in the Talmud, which means there are 70 faces to the Torah, which just means you can find so many different interpretations in every verse.
And two of them are enough in this passage.
In a way, you could say that. So, okay, let's move to 36. Because Abigail now has to go home.
Here.
And when Abigail came home to Naval, he was having a feast in his house. See, he wasn't lacking for food. He was a very rich man, a feast fit for a king, no less. Naval was in a merry mood and very drunk. So she did not tell him anything at all until daybreak. The next morning, when Naval had slept off the wine, his wife told him everything that had happened, and his courage died within him, and he became like a stone. Right? She told him that David was on his way to kill him and everyone in there and all the men in their household. And he became like a stone, which we could, he was overcome with terror. When he realized the danger to which he'd been, to how close he came to dying, had she not saved him. Of course, in verse 38, about 10 days later, God struck Naval and he died. Apparently, he was so overcome, he had a heart attack.
Is there a relationship to Medusa here that you look at her and your face will.
No, I think this is like, it's supposed to just be him getting his comeuppance. And of course, yet again, this is David being like, I won't finish you, I'll let God finish you.
Which is,
will be
relationship
Right, yeah.
stall. This is like foreshadowing.
Right, exactly, right. It's like, here's another rich guy that will die. So David didn't kill him. Right, God took care of it, but essentially his heart failed is what the Targum says.
Deep in the unconscious mind of David, is it everything's already taken care of?
And I'm gonna marry your wife.
Man, I think.
He's already married to the prince. He's already.
I mean, David is gonna marry.
Abigail.
Oh.
David has an ulterior motive.
Well, David wants to marry every woman he meets.
Yes, that's right. David is good at
There
marrying.
had to be something.
David has slayed his tens of thousands. What can I say?
And sometimes he's even good at getting married without getting married. I mean, but-
Sometimes David is quite the ancient man, I guess.
The human
This is-
condition.
This is one way for the story to end, with there being a vindication. But another way would have been for Nabal to have learned his lesson and to have changed. That does not.
If the rabbis wrote the story, maybe that would have happened.
Well, that was an attempt.
But you got to remember, of course, the Tanakh is much more deen focused than mercy focused. The rabbis really introduce the balance, the rachamim balance to the deen, because this is all very, you mess up, God's coming and getting you.
But there was even a hint that David was trying to convert Saul back to their earlier relationship and did for an instant.
Maybe. I'm not sure if he was trying to change the nature of their relationship. I think he wanted, in the eyes of God and the people who were watching, which wasn't very many, but it would be some, and that was enough to write it down, that he was intentionally merciful. Like, it was more, right, that he was like, trying to push his point that I have never harmed you.
Right.
I have never sought to harm you, and you have only ever sought to harm me.
And that would be a judging thing.
Right, that's like, it's him giving evidence in Saul's heavenly trial, essentially, which can happen anywhere at any time. And he's just giving more evidence. He's like just repeating for God, I've never tried to harm you, and you have always tried to harm me. And Saul admits, mea culpa. He says, yes, that's true.
And this doesn't have to be solved by homicide or your own suicide. He didn't have to die.
Well, he would die. It would only end when Saul died. But David wasn't going to kill Saul, and Saul didn't have to
Well, he
die
killed
by his own
himself.
hand. He didn't have to, but yeah.
But he did
yeah.
it because it was in the middle of the battle, and he
Oh.
didn't want to be taken.
Oh, is that?
Well, we'll get
Yeah.
there. We're close. We're getting there. So let's let's move on through David and Nabal. So when David heard that Nabal was dead, verse 39, he said, Baruch Hashem, praise be God, who championed my cause against the insults of Nabal and held me back from wrongdoing. God has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head. David sent messengers to propose marriage to Abigail, to take her as his wife, which would of course be wife number 2. No, he'll have a couple more, but it won't be till his son Solomon really gets to the 1,000 wives.
Yeah,
The 1,000 wives of King Solomon, of course. Right. So yeah, it's like, so Abigail had made a strong impression upon him when they met, and he realized that she was very intelligent. She could be helpful to him as a counselor. Her insightful comments displayed a high level of understanding and
Gandhi said,
sensitivity to others.
my wife is my guru.
So I mean, in this case, he's saying, look, this woman gets politics. She is very brilliant at that. She has a natural talent. I need her on my team. So this is as much a protection area. Like, you come into my household, you can be rich and in the household of the king, and I'll get the benefit of your counsel and your helping with running the kingdom and all that.
Transactional David.
Yeah, David in these is very transactional. In these books is very transactional. It is also smart. It's a good thing. If you're serving the people of God's kingdom, you want the best people around you, regardless of their gender. It's a huge move by David. I mean, again, he technically married her because there was no idea that she would become just a counselor. So the only way he could get her as a counselor is by marrying her. But David wanted a woman as his counselor. I mean, this is also kind of a progressive David. I mean, for 3,000 years ago, there weren't a lot of kings that were like, I really need a lady in my cabinet. Like,
wisdom. I mean, the earlier.
but most kings, you would imagine, it's hard to imagine Nebuchadnezzar, who would come later, or Julius Caesar, who would come 1,000 years later, having like women in their advisory cabinet.
Sweetheart, what do you think I should do?
It's just hard to imagine that. Julius Caesar barely spoke to his wife. We were talking about him earlier, let alone asked her advice on political matters. But this was a guy who was willing to do that, which is, I think, worth noting at least.
What do you think we should do?
Well,
You're the only one here.
president-elect has decided on a chief of staff who's a woman. That'd be the first time it's ever happened.
Yeah.
I think if a person is wholly subsumed under Vladimir Putin, they count as a man, maybe. But I don't know. That's just sorry, you don't want to. Now this is on the internet. This will be a whole thing.
I'm trying to.
I don't have a lot of kind things to say.
Well, I don't either, but that was a kind thing, I think.
Well, it's wonderful that he's being very progressive, I guess.
Uh,
We have the first Latino Secretary of State
Yeah,
coming in,
that's
so
decent.
that's a good thing, right?
Now,
If
his
you care
AP
about
is
that kind of
crazy,
thing.
but that's.
Anyway, back to the Torah,
Yeah.
verse 40. When David's servants came to Abigail at Carmel and told her that David had sent them to her to make her his wife, she immediately bowed low with her face to the ground and said, your handmaid is ready to be your maidservant to wash the feet of my Lord's servants. So again, this is leave that aside. This is very much, this was a reference. This goes back, remember what happened who's the greatest? That's not a great way to say it. One of the best of our matriarchs is Isaac's wife, Rebecca.
Mm.
She also is one of the most influential, guiding Jacob to be the preferred
Mm,
child,
selling.
and setting us up for our future. Rebecca also had this, she watered the servant, she watered his camels, it's a reference to her goodness. It's not, you don't need to see it directly in, she's gonna do it. She's a rich lady who's a widow now. She's not gonna wash his feet, but she's got people who are gonna do that. It's a formal thing that you do in this region at this time to show deference and hospitality.
And aside, women in great proportion, 30% are taking over the responsibilities of agriculture right now.
Fair enough. An aside indeed.
That's certain reasons.
Of course, Christ is referenced as washing feet too, being a servant.
Yes, many of the things in the Christian Bible
Right.
reference type scenes. We call these things type scenes, which is when you see the same scene or whatever happen multiple times. The scenes at the wells, like with Rebecca, are a type scene. We see many times people meeting at wells, going on to get married. So those type scenes are also useful in the Christian Bible to tie it back to the Jewish Bible.
The motto of the Groton School, to rule is to serve.
That indeed is their motto.
Yeah.
I wonder how much they would enjoy serving if they were janitors and not presidents.
Well,
We all like serving. I love being a servant leader, my man. I love it. I love it so much. But I acknowledge that I am not a servant in the same way a butler is a servant, who is not a servant the same way a
Slave.
waiter is a servant,
Yeah.
who is not a servant the same way a slave is a servant. We all have different levels of servant, and I find it very
it's a state of being.
it is a very comfortable it is very comfortable for those of us with power to hear that we are actually servants.
And that you have that choice to be or not to be.
Sure.
Mm.
So just worth pointing out, hey, if my kids could go to Groton, I probably wouldn't send them because they get anti-Semited. But it's great to give your kids all the advantages you can. But let's not pretend that, like that they're only in it for service. The next time a kid that goes to Groton ends up making $30,000 a year as a community organizer, because they're all about service,
Franklin Roosevelt.
I'll believe it. Franklin Roosevelt was one of the richest men ever to be president of the United States.
So he was a servant.
Well, but
Yes, he did a lot of
was
things.
rich. He was born rich.
He was very rich, but and it's true that a lot of people thought he was looking after their best interests, and he probably was. It's a shame everything he built is about to be destroyed over the next 4 years.
And his
But what can you
uncle
do?
gave him most of his ideas. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt.
I would suggest.
Oh, did he? I didn't think they were actually really ever close, Teddy and
Well, they
FDR.
weren't close, but his ideas were. He started.
Well, he'd had some of those progressive ideas that Teddy had at the
Well,
beginning of the
I would
20th century.
suggest the ethos has changed. For instance, there's many people who go to Harvard now are just trained to be hedge fund manager.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, if you're a hedge fund manager, you
Basically,
make a lot of
everybody
money.
went to Groton, either went to Yale or Harvard,
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, but
So-
the ethos of Groton has changed, in my opinion, but.
Who knows? I think it's good if people want to serve other people, even as
Yes.
leaders. I think that's the right attitude. I just want people to be honest about their position. Because I think too much in this world, we've drifted from honesty. We've drifted from reality to the point where we can see someone is representing things they don't represent. And that's a
I would
problem.
suggest it leads to joy in your life too.
What
Yeah.
about Joanne?
To be a servant to others.
Oh, to me it is, but not everyone,
You told me, you just told
nobody
me.
enjoys that.
You just told me that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's good for some of us, but believe me, if I cared about money, I'd have gone and been a hedge fund manager. I don't care that much about money, but other people do, and if they do, then you should go be a doctor or a hedge fund manager. 'Cause,
Not even a doctor so much anymore.
well, some of the, I'm sorry, again, I was telling Lord earlier, I have a friend who's in ER medicine, and he makes a lot of money, so it was just a lot, way more than me. So,
By
I
the
was
way,
just,
the psychiatrists are on the bottom of the totem.
oh, okay, I don't know the,
Well,
again, I only know what my friends do that are doctors.
What I remember, Chris, and I think it would probably be true for most of us, going into medicine saying, yes, I want to do good in the world,
Mhm.
but also in the same breath saying to myself, and it won't hurt that I'm gonna be able to provide for my family.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
I
knew
feel
what-
very similar about my position.
Yeah.
and,
Um,
I know that Lauren would probably scoff, but I felt I was being of service to my people that I worked with.
I won't scoff.
let's just finish. There are literally 3 verses and then we're done for the day. So we're gonna get this starting in 42. Then Abigail rose quickly. She was eager. She wanted to do this. She got how good David was gonna get. And she was, excuse me, she was like, let's do this. She rose quickly and mounted a donkey, and with 5 of her maids in attendance, again, she was a very wealthy lady. She followed David's messengers and she became his wife. Now David had taken Ahinoam of Yezreel, so both of them became his wives. Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Palti, son of Lachish, from Galim. So remember, technically he was his wife, but as in the meantime, Saul has remarried her to this other guy. So David has 2 wives technically, but really 3. Because remember, Michal loves David. And Michal is, I mean, that relationship will change over time a little bit, but so really he has 3 wives, but technically he has 2 right now. And he can have as many as he wants, I guess.
Yeah.
He's not supposed to have too many wives, because kings aren't supposed to do that, but we always must remember the Mel Brooks rule. It's good to be the king. So
And Solomon certainly fulfilled that.
yeah, Solomon enjoyed it probably too much. Kings are not supposed to, according to the Torah, kings are not supposed to amass either too much of 3 things.
Women, horses, and was it chariots?
Close.
Wine.
No,
It's
Money.
gold.
Gold, yeah.
It's fast.
Don't have too much gold, don't have too many horses, don't have too many women.
You can hear the argument.
Wives. Nashim, it means women, but it also means wives, so.
Dear Lord, if I take a few less horses, can I have more women?
Yeah, that's great off.
Well, that's like Solomon's trade, right? Solomon's like, what if I don't own any horses?
The Tom T. Hall said it's faster horses, older whiskey, younger
Tom
women,
T.
more money.
I mean, and that all comes from the wisdom of the Torah, which is trying to tell kings, if you want to be a good king, don't fall into these pitfalls of being obsessed with money, horses for both war and for sport, because they would hunt and race and other things, but they also used them for war, obviously, so not too many horses for good reasons, and not too many wives for good reasons, because we see what happens with David and the different wives and their son and their children, and who should get to be the king. Like this is a good reason not to do this. But our kings fall into the pitfalls too, because it's good to be the king. And when you're the king, I don't want to say that. When you're the king.